Rebecca adjusted her bag on her shoulder, taking one last look at the quaint countryside home she had known all her life. Nestled among vibrant flowers and lush gardens that her mother and grandfather had lovingly nurtured, the house held countless memories of her childhood. However, the tranquility was overshadowed by her grandfather's failing health and the mounting medical bills that their modest savings couldn't cover. Determined to find a way to support her family, Rebecca decided it was time to seek opportunities in the bustling city. With a suitcase filled with simple clothes, a notebook brimming with gardening notes, and a heart full of hope, she embarked on her journey. The city was a stark contrast to the open fields and peaceful gardens she had grown up in. Its sheer size and the constant rush of people made her feel small and out of place. Days turned into weeks as Rebecca tirelessly searched for a job. Each day ended with her returning to a small, rented room, exhausted and disheartened. But she refused to give up. She knew her knowledge and passion for gardening were valuable, even in a place where concrete often overshadowed nature. One afternoon, after another long day of fruitless job hunting, Rebecca stumbled upon a small residential complex. The gardens, though small, looked neglected and in desperate need of care. She took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and approached the office. An elderly woman with a kind smile, who introduced herself as Mrs. Turner, greeted her. Rebecca explained her background and her love for gardening. Mrs. Turner, impressed by Rebecca's enthusiasm and knowledge, decided to give her a chance. "You remind me of someone I knew long ago," Mrs. Turner said, her eyes twinkling. "The job is yours. Let's see if you can bring some life back to these gardens." Rebecca's heart soared. She had finally secured a job, a chance to do what she loved and support her family. She started the very next day, diving into the work with zeal. The gardens of the complex were modest, but Rebecca saw their potential. Her hands, familiar with the language of plants, began to transform the space. Flowers bloomed under her care, trees regained their vitality, and the once drab gardens burst into color. Residents began to notice the change. "The gardens have never looked this beautiful," they would say. "Who is this new gardener with the magic touch?" Rebecca, though shy, felt a deep sense of accomplishment with every compliment. She knew each kind word and each blossoming flower brought her one step closer to securing the funds needed for her grandfather's care. In addition to her job at the complex, Rebecca took on small gardening tasks in nearby homes. Her reputation grew, and soon she was known throughout the neighborhood as the go-to gardener. The extra income allowed her to send money back home regularly, accompanied by letters filled with updates and promises of better days ahead. Rebecca's life in the city was far from easy. The work was physically demanding, and the pressure of supporting her family weighed heavily on her. But her indomitable spirit and unwavering determination kept her going. She rose before dawn each day, her mind set on making the most of every opportunity. One morning, as she carefully pruned a row of roses, Mrs. Turner approached her with a small envelope in hand. "Rebecca, dear, I have something for you. It's an invitation from Mr. Alexander Green, the owner of that grand mansion on the hill. He's heard about your work and wants you to take care of his gardens. They say the pay is very generous." Rebecca's heart raced with excitement and nerves. She had heard of Alexander Green, a wealthy but reclusive man known for his vast estate. This opportunity could be the breakthrough she needed. With gratitude and determination, she accepted the invitation, ready to face the new challenges that awaited her at Alexander Green's mansion. Rebecca arrived at the mansion of Alexander Green with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The estate was grander than anything she had ever seen, with iron gates opening to a long driveway lined with ancient oak trees. The mansion itself was a marvel of architecture, with its stone walls and tall, elegant windows. A butler named Mr. Harris greeted her at the door. "Miss Rebecca, welcome. Mr. Green is looking forward to seeing what you can do with our gardens. Let me show you around." As they walked through the expansive grounds, Rebecca took in the overgrown hedges, wilted flowers, and neglected lawns. Despite the neglect, she saw immense potential in the gardens. Mr. Harris led her to a modest cottage on the property that would be her residence. It was a quaint, charming place with a small kitchen, a cozy living area, and a bedroom. "This will be your home while you work here. Feel free to make it your own," he said with a warm smile. The next morning, Rebecca began her work. She started by clearing the dead plants and pruning the overgrown hedges. Her days were long and filled with hard labor, but she was fueled by a passion for gardening and a desire to transform the grounds. Her knowledge and skill quickly became evident as flowers began to bloom, and the lawns regained their lush green appearance. Word of her work spread quickly among the mansion's staff. The housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, who had initially been skeptical, was impressed by Rebecca's dedication and talent. "You've got quite the green thumb," she remarked one afternoon while watching Rebecca plant a bed of roses. "I've never seen these gardens look so beautiful." As the weeks passed, the transformation became more and more apparent. The once neglected gardens were now vibrant and full of life. Colorful flowers lined the pathways, and the neatly trimmed hedges gave the estate a regal appearance. The staff and even the occasional visitors were in awe of the changes. One day, while Rebecca was working near a grand fountain in the center of the garden, she received a surprise visit from Mr. Green himself. Alexander Green was a tall, distinguished man in his late 40s with a serious demeanor. He rarely interacted with the staff, preferring to keep to himself. "Miss Rebecca," he called out, his voice echoing through the garden. Rebecca turned around, slightly startled. "Yes, Mr. Green," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "I've been hearing excellent things about your work," he said, walking closer. "The gardens look magnificent. You've done a remarkable job." Rebecca felt a rush of pride. "Thank you, Mr. Green. It's been an honor to work on such beautiful grounds." Alexander paused, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. "There's something familiar about you," he said, almost to himself. Before Rebecca could respond, he cleared his throat. "Carry on with your work, Miss Rebecca. You're doing splendidly." Rebecca returned to her tasks, but Alexander's words echoed in her mind. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition that she couldn't quite place. She brushed it off, focusing on the joy and satisfaction her work brought her. As the days turned into weeks, Rebecca's bond with the mansion's staff grew stronger. She became close friends with James, the head gardener, who shared her passion for plants. They often worked side by side, exchanging tips and stories about their gardening experiences. Rebecca's reputation continued to grow, and soon she was receiving requests from neighboring estates to help with their gardens. The extra income was a blessing, allowing her to send even more money back home to support her grandfather's medical expenses and provide a comfortable life for her mother. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, Rebecca sat on the porch of her cottage, reflecting on how much her life had changed since she arrived in the city. The challenges she faced had only strengthened her resolve. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunities she had been given and the support she received from the people around her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Jenkins, who handed her a letter. "This came for you today," she said with a knowing smile. Rebecca opened the letter eagerly. It was from her mother, filled with updates about her grandfather's improving health and heartfelt thanks for the money Rebecca had been sending. The letter ended with a simple but profound statement. "We are so proud of you, Rebecca. Keep shining." With renewed determination, Rebecca looked out at the garden she had worked so hard to restore. She knew that her journey was far from over, but with the support of her newfound friends and the love of her family, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Rebecca had settled into her routine at the mansion, her days filled with the rewarding labor of nurturing the gardens back to life. Her reputation as a talented gardener spread quickly, and she began to receive more job offers than she could accept. Each successful project not only boosted her confidence, but also helped her support her family back home. One morning, while tending to a particularly stubborn patch of weeds near the garden's edge, Rebecca was approached by Mrs. Jenkins. "Rebecca, there's someone here to see you," she said, her tone slightly more serious than usual. Rebecca wiped the sweat from her brow and followed Mrs. Jenkins to the front of the mansion. Standing there was a well-dressed woman in her late 50s, exuding an air of elegance and authority. "Good morning," the woman greeted, extending her hand. "I'm Mrs. Lawson, a close friend of Mr. Green. He speaks very highly of you." Rebecca shook her hand, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Lawson. How can I help you?" Mrs. Lawson smiled warmly. "I manage several high-profile properties in the city, and I've been looking for someone with your skills to help rejuvenate them. The pay is quite generous, and I believe it would be an excellent opportunity for you." Rebecca's heart raced at the prospect. The chance to work on more prestigious projects could significantly improve her family's situation. "I'm honored by the offer, Mrs. Lawson. I'd love to discuss it further." They arranged to meet later that week to go over the details. Rebecca felt a renewed sense of purpose and excitement as she returned to her work. The opportunity was more than she had hoped for when she first arrived in the city. The following days flew by as Rebecca balanced her work at the mansion with preparations for her new venture. She spent evenings planning and researching, eager to prove herself worthy of the trust Mrs. Lawson had placed in her. When the day of their meeting arrived, Rebecca dressed in her best professional attire and made her way to Mrs. Lawson's office in the city. The office was located in a sleek, modern building with large windows that offered a panoramic view of the skyline. Rebecca felt a mix of nerves and excitement as she entered the spacious office. "Rebecca, welcome," Mrs. Lawson greeted her, motioning for her to take a seat. They discussed the scope of the projects, which included several luxury properties and high-end residential gardens. The pay was indeed generous, enough to make a significant difference in Rebecca's financial situation. "I'm confident you'll do a fantastic job," Mrs. Lawson said, handing Rebecca a folder with all the necessary details. "I've already informed Mr. Green, and he fully supports your decision. He's very impressed with your work." Rebecca felt a wave of gratitude and determination. "Thank you, Mrs. Lawson. I won't let you down." As she left the office, Rebecca's mind was buzzing with ideas and plans. She knew the additional responsibilities would be challenging, but she was ready to face them head-on. Her time at the mansion had prepared her well, and she felt confident in her abilities. Back at the mansion, Rebecca shared the news with James and Mrs. Jenkins, who were thrilled for her. "You deserve this, Rebecca," James said, clapping her on the back. "You've worked so hard, and it's paying off." Mrs. Jenkins nodded in agreement. "We'll miss having you here full-time, but we know you'll do amazing things." That evening, as Rebecca sat on her porch, she reflected on how far she had come. The city, which once felt so intimidating and impersonal, had become a place of opportunity and growth. Her hard work and dedication were opening doors she never thought possible. She wrote a letter to her family, sharing the exciting news and reassuring them that better days were on the horizon. With each passing day, Rebecca felt more empowered and determined to succeed. She knew that this new opportunity was just the beginning of a brighter future for herself and her loved ones. Rebecca's first day at the grand mansion of Alexander Green was filled with nervous anticipation. The grandeur of the estate was breathtaking, with its sprawling gardens that hinted at their former glory. She was eager to restore them to their full potential. Upon arrival, she was greeted by Mr. Harris, the butler, who introduced her to the mansion's head gardener, James. "Welcome, Rebecca," James said warmly. "We've heard great things about your work." James gave her a tour of the extensive grounds, pointing out areas that needed immediate attention. The gardens, though neglected, were still beautiful in their wildness. Rebecca could see the potential everywhere she looked. She was also introduced to Mrs. Jenkins, the housekeeper, who had a reputation for being stern but fair. "I hope you can bring some life back to these gardens," Mrs. Jenkins remarked. "They've been a bit neglected since our last gardener left." Rebecca set to work immediately, starting with the overgrown hedges and weedy flower beds. She worked tirelessly, her passion for gardening driving her to restore the estate's beauty. The initial days were challenging, but she relished the opportunity to transform the gardens. Each day, Rebecca's progress was evident. Flowers began to bloom, and the once tangled vines were neatly trimmed. The staff watched in amazement as the gardens slowly came back to life. Even Mrs. Jenkins, who rarely showed emotion, seemed pleased with the changes. One afternoon, as Rebecca was planting a new rose bush near the central fountain, she noticed Alexander Green watching her from a distance. His presence was imposing, and his gaze was intense. He approached her, breaking the silence. "Miss Rebecca," he began, "I've been observing your work. The gardens are looking splendid." Rebecca smiled, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. "Thank you, Mr. Green. It's an honor to work here." Alexander seemed to hesitate for a moment, his eyes lingering on her face. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he said softly. "Someone very dear to me." Rebecca felt a strange connection in his words, but didn't press further. "I'm glad to be of service," she replied. As the weeks passed, Rebecca continued to work diligently, transforming the mansion's gardens into a breathtaking sanctuary. Her dedication and skill did not go unnoticed, and she found herself becoming more integrated into the life of the estate. The staff, once skeptical, now admired and respected her. James, in particular, became a close friend and mentor, sharing his extensive knowledge and experience. Rebecca's journey at the mansion was just beginning, and she felt a growing sense of belonging and purpose. She knew that her work was making a difference, not just in the gardens, but in the hearts of those around her. Rebecca's relentless dedication to the gardens at Alexander Green's mansion soon began to show remarkable results. Each day, she poured her heart and soul into her work, meticulously tending to every plant, shrub, and flower bed. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The once neglected hedges were now perfectly trimmed, forming elegant shapes that enhanced the beauty of the pathways. Vibrant flowers bloomed in every corner, creating a tapestry of colors that brought the gardens to life. The lawns, once overgrown and patchy, were now lush and green, inviting the staff and visitors to stroll and admire the view. The staff marveled at the changes. Mrs. Jenkins, who had initially been skeptical, now often found herself smiling as she walked through the rejuvenated gardens. "It's as if the whole place has come alive again," she remarked to James one morning. Rebecca has truly worked wonders. James nodded in agreement. I've never seen anyone with such a natural talent for gardening. She has a gift, that's for sure. Alexander Green, too, took notice of the transformation. He would often take his morning coffee on the terrace, overlooking the gardens. The sight of the blooming flowers and the neatly manicured lawns brought a rare smile to his face. He felt a sense of peace and nostalgia, reminiscent of a time long past. One afternoon, as Rebecca was planting a new bed of lavender near the mansion's entrance, Alexander approached her. "Miss Rebecca," he called out. Rebecca stood up, wiping the dirt from her hands. "Yes, Mr. Green. I just wanted to thank you for your incredible work," Alexander said, his voice sincere. "The gardens haven't looked this beautiful in years." Rebecca smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Green. It's been a pleasure to work here. The gardens have so much potential." Alexander's gaze lingered on her, a mix of admiration and something deeper. "You have a remarkable talent. The way you bring life to these gardens. It's truly special." As Rebecca continued her work, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of connection to the mansion and its inhabitants. She became close friends with the staff, especially James, who shared his extensive knowledge and stories from his years as a gardener. They often worked side by side, discussing new ideas and plans for further enhancing the estate's beauty. Rebecca's reputation continued to grow, and she started receiving more requests for her services from other estates in the area. The extra income was a blessing, allowing her to send even more money back home. Her grandfather's health was improving, and her mother often wrote to her, expressing their gratitude and pride. One day, while Rebecca was working on a particularly intricate topiary design, she noticed a small crowd gathering near the entrance. Curious, she approached and found Mrs. Jenkins talking to a group of visitors. "These are some friends of Mr. Green," Mrs. Jenkins explained. "They've heard about the gardens and wanted to see them for themselves." The visitors were visibly impressed, their faces lighting up as they walked through the vibrant, colorful paths. "It's like a paradise," one of them remarked. "I've never seen anything like it." Rebecca felt a sense of fulfillment watching their reactions. The gardens had become a source of joy and inspiration for many, and she was proud to be the driving force behind their transformation. As the sun set that evening, casting a warm glow over the estate, Rebecca stood in the center of the garden, taking in the beauty around her. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment and purpose. The journey had been challenging, but every moment of hard work had been worth it. The gardens were not just a testament to her skills, but also a symbol of her resilience and determination. Rebecca knew that her work here was far from over, but she was ready to face any challenges that lay ahead, confident in her abilities and surrounded by the support of her newfound friends. Rebecca's hard work in the gardens had transformed the estate into a haven of beauty and tranquility. As she continued her work, Alexander Green began to take more frequent walks through the gardens, his admiration for her work growing with each passing day. One sunny afternoon, while Rebecca was pruning roses near the central fountain, she noticed Alexander approaching. He had a contemplative look on his face. "Miss Rebecca," he called, his voice carrying a hint of urgency. Rebecca turned, smiling warmly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Green. How can I help you?" Alexander's eyes were fixed on her necklace, a delicate pendant in the shape of a moon. His expression turned to one of disbelief. "That necklace," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Where did you get it?" Rebecca touched the pendant, surprised by his reaction. "It was a gift from my mother. She gave it to me when I was a child." It's the only piece of jewelry I've ever worn." Alexander's face paled, and he took a step back, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. "This is impossible," he muttered, more to himself than to Rebecca. "That necklace is identical to one I gave to someone very special many years ago." Rebecca's curiosity was piqued, and she could see the distress in Alexander's eyes. "Mr. Green, who did you give it to?" Alexander took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "To my girlfriend, Evelyn. She was the love of my life. She disappeared many years ago, and I thought I'd never see her again. That necklace was a symbol of our love." Rebecca's heart raced as she processed his words. "My mother's name is Evelyn." She never talked much about her past, only that she had to leave the city for some reason. Alexander looked at Rebecca, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and pain. "Could it be that your mother is the Evelyn I lost all those years ago?" Rebecca felt a whirlwind of emotions. "Mr. Green, if my mother is the Evelyn you knew, then we need to find out the truth. I can arrange for you to meet her." Alexander nodded, a determined look in his eyes. "Yes, we must. I need to know what happened. I need to see her again." They quickly made plans for Alexander to visit Rebecca's hometown and meet her mother. The possibility that his long-lost love might still be alive, and that Rebecca was her daughter, filled him with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. As Rebecca continued her work that day, her mind was flooded with questions about her mother's past and the connection between her family and Alexander Green. The revelation had shaken her, but it also brought a sense of hope and excitement for what lay ahead. Alexander, too, was deeply affected by the encounter. The necklace that had brought so many memories rushing back now seemed like a beacon, guiding him toward answers and possibly a reunion with a woman he had never stopped loving. The following morning, Rebecca and Alexander set off for her hometown. The drive was long, and the atmosphere in the car was filled with anticipation and anxiety. Alexander couldn't help but replay memories of Evelyn in his mind, hoping against hope that Rebecca's mother was indeed the woman he had loved and lost. As they approached the small town, Rebecca pointed out familiar landmarks. "That's the old bakery where my grandfather used to take me," she said, trying to ease the tension with small talk. Alexander listened intently, appreciating the glimpse into Rebecca's life. Finally, they arrived at Rebecca's family home. It was a modest, charming house surrounded by well-tended gardens, a testament to the family's love for nature. Rebecca led Alexander to the front door, her heart pounding with nervous excitement. Rebecca's mother, Evelyn, opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise at the sight of her daughter and the unexpected guest. "Rebecca, what a pleasant surprise!" she exclaimed, pulling her daughter into a warm embrace. Her gaze then shifted to Alexander, and her smile faltered slightly. "Evelyn," Alexander said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "It's me, Alexander." Evelyn's eyes widened further, and she took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. "Alexander, is it really you?" she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's me," Alexander confirmed, stepping closer. "I've missed you so much." Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she reached out to touch his arm, as if to confirm he was real. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said, her voice trembling. Rebecca watched the emotional reunion, her own eyes filling with tears. "Mom, I found out that Mr. Green and you have a past. I had to bring him here to find out the truth." Evelyn nodded, wiping her tears and taking a deep breath. "Come inside, both of you. We have a lot to talk about." They sat in the cozy living room, where Evelyn began to recount her story. "Alexander, when I left the city, it wasn't by choice. My father was very ill, and I had to come back to take care of him. I planned to return to you, but circumstances kept me here longer than I expected." She paused, looking at Rebecca with a mixture of guilt and love. "By the time I was ready to return, I found out I was pregnant with Rebecca. I was scared and didn't know how to contact you. I didn't want to disrupt your life." Alexander listened, his heart breaking for the lost years. "Evelyn, I would have done anything to be with you and to help. I searched for you, but it was like you vanished. I never stopped loving you." Rebecca, feeling a mix of emotions, reached out and took her mother's hand. "Mom, why didn't you tell me any of this?" Evelyn squeezed her hand, tears still streaming down her face. "I was trying to protect you, Rebecca. I didn't want you to feel the burden of my past." Alexander leaned forward, his voice filled with determination. "Evelyn, it's not too late. We can start anew. Rebecca deserves to know her father, and I want to be part of your lives." Evelyn nodded, her expression softening. "You're right, Alexander. We can't change the past, but we can build a future together." The three of them sat together, sharing stories and memories, slowly bridging the gap created by years of separation. The pain of the past began to fade as they focused on the possibilities of the future. The reunion was bittersweet, but it marked the beginning of a new chapter filled with hope and love. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the countryside, Alexander, Evelyn, and Rebecca felt a renewed sense of family and belonging. The journey that had started with a simple necklace had led them to a profound and life-changing discovery. They knew that the road ahead would have its challenges, but together they were ready to face whatever came their way. In the days following the emotional reunion, Alexander, Evelyn, and Rebecca began to adjust to their new reality. Alexander extended his stay in the countryside, wanting to spend as much time as possible with Evelyn and Rebecca, rebuilding the bonds that had been lost over the years. Each morning, Rebecca and Alexander would work together in the garden, exchanging stories and learning more about each other. Alexander was fascinated by Rebecca's deep knowledge and passion for plants, and she, in turn, was eager to hear about his life and experiences. One afternoon, while they were planting a new flower bed, Alexander turned to Rebecca. "You know, these past few days have been some of the best of my life. I'm grateful to have found you and your mother." Rebecca smiled, feeling a warm sense of belonging. "I feel the same way. It's like we're finally complete." Inside the house, Evelyn and Alexander spent hours catching up on lost time, sharing their hopes and fears. They often reminisced about their past, laughing and crying together. "I've missed you so much," Alexander said one evening, holding Evelyn's hand. "I can't believe we're finally together again." Evelyn nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I never stopped thinking about you, Alexander. I'm so glad we have this second chance." As the days passed, Alexander proposed a new plan. "Evelyn, Rebecca, I want both of you to move to the city with me. We can live together and truly become a family." Evelyn hesitated, the weight of the decision evident on her face. "I don't know, Alexander. This is our home, and it's where Rebecca grew up." Rebecca looked at her mother and then at Alexander. "Mom, I think it's a wonderful idea. We can always come back here to visit, but I want to be close to both of you. We deserve this chance to be a family." Evelyn smiled, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "All right, let's do it. Let's start anew together." The decision was made. They began planning their move to the city, filled with excitement and a sense of adventure. The small house that had been their home for so long would remain a cherished place, but their future now lay in the city with Alexander. As they prepared for the move, the bond between them grew stronger. They faced each challenge with unity and love, knowing that together they could overcome anything. The future was bright, and they were ready to embrace it as a family. The day of the move arrived with a mix of excitement and nostalgia. Evelyn, Rebecca, and Alexander stood together, looking at the quaint house and lush garden they were leaving behind. "This place holds so many memories," Evelyn said, her voice tinged with emotion. Rebecca nodded, hugging her mother. "We'll always have this home to return to. But now, we have a new adventure ahead of us." Alexander smiled, his heart warmed by the unity of his newfound family. "Let's make new memories together in the city." With the help of a moving company, they packed their belongings into a truck. Rebecca took a final walk through the garden, touching the flowers she had nurtured. "I'll miss this place," she whispered, feeling a pang of sadness. The journey to the city was filled with hopeful anticipation. Alexander shared stories about their new home, describing the spacious house with its own garden. "You'll love it, Rebecca. There's so much potential for you to create something beautiful." When they arrived, the house was just as Alexander had described, grand yet welcoming. Rebecca's eyes widened in amazement as she took in the sprawling garden, filled with untamed beauty waiting for her touch. "It's perfect," she said, already envisioning the transformations she would make. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, with plenty of space for each of them. Evelyn and Alexander chose a room together, while Rebecca picked a cozy corner room with large windows overlooking the garden. "This view is incredible," she said, feeling a surge of inspiration. Over the next few days, they settled into their new routines. Alexander returned to his business, but he made sure to spend quality time with Evelyn and Rebecca every evening. They shared meals, explored the city, and continued to bond as a family. Rebecca immersed herself in transforming the garden. She worked tirelessly, bringing order and beauty to the overgrown spaces. Her passion and dedication attracted the attention of the neighbors, who often stopped by to admire her work. "You have a real talent," one of them remarked. "The garden is already looking amazing." Evelyn, too, found joy in their new life. She reconnected with old friends and made new ones, finding a sense of community she had missed in the countryside. "This city has so much to offer," she told Alexander one evening. "I'm glad we made this move." As the weeks turned into months, the house became a true home filled with laughter, love, and new memories. The garden flourished under Rebecca's care, becoming a stunning oasis in the heart of the city. One sunny afternoon, as they sat together on the patio, Alexander looked at Evelyn and Rebecca with a contented smile. "I can't believe how much our lives have changed. I'm so grateful for both of you." Rebecca reached out and took his hand. "We're grateful for you too, Alexander. We're a family now, and nothing can change that." Evelyn nodded, her eyes shining with happiness. "We've come a long way, and we have so much to look forward to." The move to the city marked a new chapter in their lives, one filled with promise and possibility. Together, they faced each day with strength and love, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Settling into their new life in the city, Alexander, Evelyn, and Rebecca quickly found a rhythm that suited them. The days were filled with new activities and opportunities, and the bonds between them grew stronger. Rebecca's passion for gardening continued to blossom. She expanded her efforts beyond their home, taking on projects in the neighborhood and even starting a small business. Her reputation as a talented gardener spread, and she found herself in high demand. "Your work is truly transformative," one client said. You've brought so much life and beauty to our garden." With each new project, Rebecca's confidence grew. She loved the sense of accomplishment that came with seeing a neglected garden turn into a vibrant, thriving space. Her work not only brought joy to her clients, but also provided a steady income that helped support her family. Alexander, meanwhile, was thriving in his business ventures. He found renewed energy and purpose in his work, knowing that he was building a future for his family. Despite his busy schedule, he made sure to carve out time for Evelyn and Rebecca. They often had dinner together, sharing stories and laughter. "Family is what matters most," Alexander would say, and he meant it. Evelyn embraced city life with enthusiasm. She volunteered at local community centers, made new friends, and reconnected with old ones. Her days were busy and fulfilling, and she often remarked on how much happier she felt. "I never realized how much I missed this kind of community," she told Alexander one evening. One weekend, they decided to host a garden party to celebrate their new life. Rebecca spent days preparing, ensuring every detail was perfect. The garden was in full bloom, with colorful flowers and lush greenery creating a picturesque setting. As guests arrived, the atmosphere was filled with joy and laughter. Neighbors, friends, and business associates mingled, admiring the beautiful garden and enjoying the delicious food and drinks. "This is wonderful," one guest remarked to Alexander. "You have a beautiful home and a lovely family." Rebecca felt a deep sense of pride and happiness. She looked around at the smiling faces and realized how far they had come. The journey had been challenging, but the rewards were immeasurable. As the evening drew to a close, Alexander gathered everyone for a toast. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us," he began. "This new chapter in our lives has been filled with love, growth, and happiness. I'm grateful for my family, for Evelyn and Rebecca, who have brought so much joy into my life." Evelyn and Rebecca raised their glasses, their eyes shining with tears of happiness. "To family," Evelyn said softly, "to new beginnings and to the future." The guests cheered, and the clinking of glasses filled the air. In that moment, surrounded by friends and loved ones, Alexander, Evelyn, and Rebecca felt a profound sense of contentment and fulfillment. The garden party marked a significant milestone in their new life. It was a testament to their resilience, love, and the strength of their family bond. As they continued to build their future together, they knew that they could face any challenge and embrace every joy. Rebecca's business flourished, Alexander's work thrived, and Evelyn's community involvement deepened. Each day brought new opportunities and experiences, strengthening their connection and enriching their lives. They had found a true home in the city, not just in the physical space, but in the love and support they shared. The garden, once a symbol of Rebecca's skill and dedication, had become a symbol of their family's journey, a journey of rediscovery, reconciliation, and endless possibilities. As Alexander, Evelyn, and Rebecca continued to build their new life in the city, they encountered challenges that tested their strength and unity. Despite the happiness and success they had found, life had its inevitable ups and downs. One significant challenge arose when Alexander's business faced unexpected financial difficulties. A major client backed out of a crucial deal, causing a ripple effect that threatened the stability of his company. Alexander spent long hours at the office, trying to navigate through the crisis and find solutions. Evelyn noticed the strain on Alexander and tried to support him as best as she could. She often stayed up late, waiting for him to come home, offering a listening ear and words of encouragement. "We'll get through this, Alexander," she reassured him one night. "We've faced tougher times before." Rebecca, too, sensed the tension and decided to help in any way she could. She took on more gardening projects, even expanding her services to include landscape design. Her business was thriving, and she used the extra income to contribute to the household expenses. "We're a team," she told her parents. "We'll get through this together." As weeks turned into months, Alexander's hard work and determination began to pay off. He managed to secure new clients and stabilize the business, though it required significant sacrifices and effort. Through it all, he was grateful for Evelyn and Rebecca's unwavering support. However, just as things started to look up, another challenge emerged. Carlos, Evelyn's father, fell seriously ill. The family had to make difficult decisions about his care, balancing their work and personal lives with the need to be there for him. They brought Carlos to the city, ensuring he received the best medical attention possible. Evelyn spent countless hours by her father's side, managing his treatments and providing emotional support. Rebecca juggled her expanding business with helping care for her grandfather. Despite the exhaustion, the family remained united and strong. During this time, the garden once again became a place of solace and reflection for all of them. Rebecca often found herself working late into the evening, finding peace and clarity among the plants. Alexander joined her whenever he could, the act of gardening providing a much-needed respite from his stressful days. One evening, as they worked side by side, Alexander looked at Rebecca and said, "I don't know what I would have done without you and your mother. You both have been my rock through all of this." Rebecca smiled, her hands covered in soil. "We're a family, Dad. We face everything together." The challenges also brought Evelyn and Alexander closer. They leaned on each other for support, finding strength in their renewed relationship. The hardships they faced only deepened their love and commitment to one another. Carlos's health slowly improved, thanks to the care and attention he received. He expressed his gratitude to the family, especially to Alexander. "Thank you for everything," he said weakly but sincerely. "You've given me a second chance." Through these trials, the family learned the true meaning of resilience and unity. They faced each obstacle head-on, supporting one another with love and determination. Their journey was far from easy, but it was filled with moments of growth and bonding. As the seasons changed, the garden continued to flourish, reflecting the family's journey. The flowers bloomed more vibrantly, the trees stood taller, and the entire space seemed to exude a sense of peace and renewal. By the time Carlos was strong enough to enjoy the garden again, the family gathered for a small celebration. They sat together, surrounded by the beauty that Rebecca had cultivated, and reflected on their journey. "We've been through so much," Evelyn said, her voice filled with emotion. "But look at us now. We're stronger than ever." Alexander nodded, his eyes shining with pride. "Together, we can face anything." Rebecca looked around at her family, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and love. "We've built something beautiful here, not just in the garden, but in our lives. And we'll keep growing, no matter what comes our way." The challenges they had faced had only made them stronger. United by love and determination, they were ready to embrace whatever the future held, confident in their ability to overcome any obstacle together. With the hardships behind them, the family looked forward to a future filled with promise. Carlos's health continued to improve, and the atmosphere at home became lighter. The garden, now a symbol of their resilience, flourished under Rebecca's care. Alexander's business rebounded, stronger than ever. He found a renewed passion for his work, inspired by the support of his family. Evelyn continued to volunteer and connect with the community, finding fulfillment in her activities. Rebecca's gardening business also thrived. She expanded her services, taking on larger projects and gaining recognition for her talent. The garden at home remained her sanctuary, a place where she could reflect and recharge. One evening, the family gathered in the garden for a simple celebration. They shared stories, laughed, and enjoyed the serene beauty around them. "We've come so far," Alexander said, looking at Evelyn and Rebecca with pride. "I'm grateful for every moment we've had together." Evelyn smiled, holding his hand. "Our journey has made us stronger and closer. I'm thankful for this family we've built." Rebecca looked at her parents, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "We've faced so much, but we've done it together. And now, we have a future filled with possibilities." The garden, vibrant and full of life, mirrored their journey. It was a testament to their growth, love, and determination. United, they were ready to embrace whatever the future held, confident in their strength as a family.